I got signed up for a 5K running as one of the sheriff's office teams.
Did you
So
say you
trying
got
to-
signed up for it?
Well, I volunteered to help, meaning like a water
Yeah.
station, a booth. No, they put
Hi,
me on
can
the
you hear
running team.
me?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
We can hear
To
you.
a diet
Good,
nut.
hi.
Welcome. People are just now signing on, so you're missing refreshments.
Okay, I have some soup.
Just relax with your soup for a minute. Poor thing.
So is it like a team 5K? Like y'all run like a mile or so? Okay, well, that's not worse. Hello?
I think we're all running, like all 5 of us on the team have to run the whole 5K.
Oh.
And then
Oh,
like cross
no.
country does it, like if you come in first, second, and third place, you get 1, 2, and 3 points. So your team total is 6, and whoever has the least points wins. So the further back in line you are, the higher your number. So I think that's the way they're scoring it. So I'm totally gonna blow the curve. I am not a runner at all. So the last couple of weeks I've been trying to eat a little better and run more.
I did the volunteer chase at Go Fast last year.
Mm.
I was dying. And then my roommate's like, hey, we're doing it this year. I was like, okay. I've done, I didn't train it all over.
Can I stop? I can pause it.
Yeah. So I had a very constructive conversation this morning with the city attorney and the assistant city manager. Now everyone's listening and very interested in my PACE program. So it's a big deal. It's like a lot of money for the city in terms of economic development and a great opportunity. So super excited about that.
That's very exciting.
It is very exciting.
That seems like it should be broadly available to the wider audience, knowing about that. Any other announcements suitable for public consumption? Public within our CPL private group? Mentor, mentee, snafus, successes, are you still thinking about them or pursuing?
I'm still thinking.
Okay. Let's move forward. McGregor. You love him or you hate him?
He's a character.
He's a character. For sure, McGregor was a character. And for all the world, he looked a little lazy, if you want to cast him in that light. On the other side of that coin, the conflictual interpretation is that he was wildly strategic and had a different kind of pace than most of us are accustomed to. What turned you off about it? What did you find challenging? What did you find wildly appealing?
I think it's an interesting perspective on being really clear about what your role is and having those boundaries in place and understanding what people's roles are in relationship to you and where their authority is placed and where your authority is placed. I loved the fact that it was, I think, an excellent example of making sure the right people have the right authority and the right responsibility, and that's clearly defined.
And they left a little bit of ambiguity in that there's room for collaboration and asking for help within their team, and then you get your report back who helped you. And therefore he knew who the pipeline should include for promotion and succession.
Because of how much information he was getting by not doing anything.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? He was getting a
He had a
lot.
proper reporting strategy, didn't he?
I mean, he knew, like I said, who was helping who was able to do it on their own, who needed help. And he was getting a lot of information.
And the trust structure in place.
Yeah, that-
Just having the trust that they're gonna make the decision, or if they don't, that they're probably gonna learn from it. It's lacking in a lot of places.
And wouldn't you get some hint of that if someone was not involved in having anyone come to them ever? Because you can see what the functionality on that team looks like based on whether people wanted to give each other credit or go to each other. Don't they sort of say, there was an article in Harvard Business Review, I don't know, 15 years ago. We go to the likable fool rather than the competent jerk. It would be nice if we all sort of pulled together and raised our collective competence. But if someone's going to be judgmental or create casualties, shove people to the margins, and act like a know-it-all, people will not go to him or her.
I also saw the ownership and the responsibility that he was giving his subordinates. Like, they had to take ownership of solving the problem or not being able to solve the problem or getting someone to assist them. There had to be some adrenaline in that, solving your own problem. Of course, I'm sure there was a little fear, but the adrenaline that comes with the ownership in making those decisions, because those were big decisions.
And they held the pressure for themselves and therefore the authority. If you know you're always going to be able just to go to the boss whenever you want, there's no actual ownership, there's no real ownership, is there? You always have a backup or a cover. You can always document it. I always sort of squint my eyes a little bit when somebody needs to document everything. It says a lot about the culture if they have to cover themselves and be able to prove it later. So Amanda comes next week, or in 2 weeks when we meet again on October 2nd. And I believe she has implemented this with her executive team, but Renee might know something about that. Does McGregor happen very often at a conscious level on?
I don't know that it's that extreme,
Okay.
but she certainly is not a micromanage.
If you have a question, do you go right to her or do you tend to access other people first?
Depends on the question, but
Okay.
yeah, certainly accessing my peer group is welcomed and expected.
If nobody can figure it out, then you elevate it depending on what it is.
We do a lot of meetings where you have a meeting and then figure out whose problem it is and who owns it. And so we do a lot of just thinking about things and how we're going to approach something versus just solving an issue. So we do a lot of discussions about that.
And you'd say the trust is pretty good.
Yeah, to a certain level, I think. There's always the direct staff. I think there's always some level of distrust of upper management.
Sure. Your peer group, though.
Oh, yeah.
You function
My-
pretty
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And you
have a
hold
lot
hard
of trust.
conversations.
Yeah.
Trying to segue us into the first part of
Yeah.
dysfunctions.
Yeah,
model
we,
later.
yeah, we're not afraid of the conflict. We don't do the artificial harmony.
And you offer to
I like that.
have people poke holes in ideas, right?
That's
That's pretty
expected.
awesome.
It is expected that you will play devil's advocate when someone says something. You will, push back. That's expected. Just to flesh out and get to the best result, not to be argumentative. And nobody takes it personally. Everybody enjoys it. It's a good group.
Is that the same at everybody else's workplace?
No, we tend to take it personally.
Okay.
She hit the nail right on the head with that.
Yeah, our whole core group, because we do the same thing. We'll, get together and talk about the ideas and talk through things. And a lot of people, myself included, take it a little too personally sometimes. Because sometimes, I think I have the best solution. So I have to take a step down and realize that I don't always have the right solution.
Others? But so do you enjoy those meetings? Or do you dread them?
Oh, no, I enjoy them.
You enjoy it when people are taking it personally?
Not the taking personally part, but I love problem solving.
Okay.
So anytime I can talk about ideas, try to work through things. That's what I like to do.
How often do your feelings get hurt?
It depends on who it comes from.
Renee, how often do your feelings get hurt? They don't, okay. How about the rest?
I've taken some things personal, but I I don't exist in the same kind of arena that Sam does.
Sure.
My position is kind of like, I kind of get lended out. That's the best way to put it. I get lended out on different projects. So I have to figure out immediately where I fit in that group quickly. I have to move quickly. I don't have time to kind of, fill out a whole lot of things because the project is moving really fast. 9 times out of 10, when they put me in, it's already moving. And they're like, oh, by the way, you look like you'll be a good candidate. We'll just throw you on in there. And I just kind of go in there. And I've had situations where I've taken something personal. What has happened is the team is getting a bit chippy because of timelines and deadlines, and things are happening. And so stuff is trickling from the top. And for me, I'm not feeling it because I'm on loan. I'm not technically part of that team. So, I'm always kind of optimistic about it. And they're not ready to receive it just yet. That's the best way to put it.
Way to put it. Right.
So I've had situations I'm like, oh, wow. And I know I wasn't supposed to take it personal, but I did. And I attempt to kind of communicate back, well, yeah, it's not that important to me. They may not be the right choice of words, but I'll go, yeah, it doesn't affect me the way it affects you. So when you're ready, I'll be over here. That's exactly how I deal with actually every team, including my department.
That makes it harder. So I think because of our team, we know each other really well.
Mhm.
So because I know that person, I know what they're saying, where it's coming from,
Mhm.
right? We all have the same mission, we all have the same goal.
Mhm.
So if they're saying they're concerned about something that I want to do,
Mhm.
it's not because of me, it's because we all want to have the best product.
Mhm.
So I want to hear, so it's different because we have a relationship, which makes it easier, I
Yes.
think, than trying to figure that out with people you don't have a
Yeah, I've
relationship
been
with.
an outcast for a long time. I actually just got a desk probably 4 years ago where I actually have a desk that I can call mine with a door kind of thing. I would literally go from project to project. So I might be in operations, I might be in marketing. It just depends on where they want me. And I just figure out exactly where I fit real quick and get in, get out. And
Are there a team of nomads, or you are the only? Like, do you have
Well,
a team?
a team of nomads.
Well, I mean, at least then you'd have a team.
Yeah.
Well, back in the beginning, it was 2 of us. And then they've kind of changed the project, I guess, management office at that point. But it was 2 of us. And even then, she had an office and I didn't. I would literally move
Wander
from space. Yeah. And it really didn't bother me. It just, at times, I would take stuff kind of personal kind of thing. I'm like, oh, was that a shot at me? And sometimes it's not, but that's exactly how I would feel like, wait a minute, hold on, because I'm the new girl in the group, So
Sounds as
that's
if
something I
you've
need to work
been
on.
able to see lots of different teams though,
Mhm.
and how they work
Mhm.
together.
And I managed to kind of get to know a lot of people through that. It's interesting. I can't even tell you what my job includes. It's several pieces, put it that way.
Is there a piece of McGregor that is available to you as you can conceive implementing it, such that people are a little more equipped to work at their capacity instead of running directly to you as if you're the lifeline? Is there a way to try to do that you've thought of since reading this?
Oh, yeah. especially the part where instead of, so we have a status meeting every Friday. I'm actually probably doing it Thursdays now.
The
So-
Thursday meeting,
Yeah.
all right.
But normally it's just, you know, what's going on and what problems do you have, what to change it up. So instead of having them list their problems, to tell them what decisions they've made instead, and then figure out the problems. between them.
Renee, were you given that article, that chapter,
Oh,
when
yeah.
you started working there?
Maybe even before.
So have a little prior knowledge about what it takes to unroll this sort of thing. Would it be better if they just hear the abrupt directive of work it out amongst yourselves and then report into me the decisions you made on Thursday? Or would it help to give them context and have them read something like this? Do you have
I
some
feel like this
insight
is a
about
trick
that?
question.
What?
I feel like this is a trick question.
Oh, no, definitely not. I'm just wondering, I mean, we have some sort of evidence of, that's part of their culture, that they said, we're going to create this change. Here's sort of the reasoning behind it. It helps develop everyone and preserves the next level up so you can actually working on things they'll appreciate more that are in your job description. Gives them some model for who goes to whom. Especially if you start saying, well, who do you give credit for in helping you make the decisions, then they can know. Unless you need it to be your original incubated idea where you get credit for doing it. What do you think the result might be one way or the other? I mean, I could also see how it would backfire. And they say, oh, well, we're just learning this thing that the flavor of the moment.
Right.
There's lots of organizations are good on, here's the hottest book or the hottest article on the line, and this is going to be the salvation.
I think they'll be much better with content behind it,
Okay.
right? To supplement it with why is there change and risk averse for the three managers that I have before me. So have to kind of give them the wins behind why I think this is going to make things better. Personally.
Yeah, I think why gives you buy-in, right?
Right.
It's easier
Yeah.
to get buy-in.
Yeah,
if they understand
explain why and then relate to them personally on how it's going to improve what they're going to see.
So let's help you practice. Let's assume you've given them some context for it. You've explained it all out. And then you have one or two people who ignore it and come right to you instead. What will be your response? When they know it's not Thursday yet, it's Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Are you going to suck up and cater and overfunction and answer?
No.
Oh, good.
No. I mean, I think I had a good example of the first guy that was there, trying to keep going with them. So trying to, keep sitting in the back from, tell me what the solution is. What do you think it is? Then see if they can, ask them if they've reached out to any of their peers, if they've reached out to anybody else that might have an idea, moving towards that model.
And they say no, you'll say,
Go back and do it.
if they say, I reached out to such and such, but there's 3 more people they could reach out to, what will you say?
Well, have you talked to Sandy or have you talked to Tracy? Not then go talk to them. Then bring the solution back.
There's a chance that you're inviting an extra conversation or two, because when you share the ground rules, part of that will be, so that everybody that has the knowledge of this, right, and accessibility to the information before you darken the door, before you come. And you can be nice about it. I know you'll be nice about it.
Right.
But instead of going down the line, well, what about this person? What about this person? You're still putting yourself in that sort of parental leading role.
I had a boss that would always say, research it.
Go research it. Before you come to me, go research it. And we knew that we'd have to go prepared with a solution when we went in to talk with her. But I think the caution that I would see is that you need to make sure you're ready to be a McGregor if you're going to do this, because there is nothing worse than somebody who thinks they're a McGregor and they're really a that isn't the way I would do it. Because then, even though you may get to the exact same result, some people are not open to you taking a different pathway. And I certainly have experienced that in some of my work relationships as well. You may get to the exact same spot, but you didn't do it the way I would do it. So let's talk about it. And that's pretty deflating as well.
Good point.
Yeah, we also do like the flip side, which is also making sure people are going to someone who can help versus just going to someone, right? Because there's that person, you know, that you just want to vent to or complain to. They can't help you with the problem. You're just, and then that's just unnecessary extra conversations. So we have to make sure that you're going to someone who could actually help.
What about the possibility of giving, well, I know McGregor didn't do this, but giving just like a little bit more encouragement, you know, I know you got this. So just go ahead and, you know, ask the other two, or, you know, I believe you're going to find the answer. So giving them just a drop of confidence to go back and I'm convinced that you can do this. So go do it, kind of thing. I mean, I know with my supervisor, that's what it's kind of like. And I think I've been with her so long, I just know what she expects at this point. But I'm the same way. I have to come to her with a solution. I like to say I come with options. And one of the options would be, we can't do it. But that's exactly how she, you know, if I am stuck and I can't get anywhere and I've asked who I needed to ask, number one, she knows that'll be the only time I come to her and talk to her. And number two, if she's convinced that I can find that answer, she's like, I know you got this. And it's like, I needed that extra push to go and ask someone else or do the research and look a little bit deeper to find the answer.
How many people have employees who are scared to mess up?
I'm scared to mess up.
Sure. Like, is there a range of reasonability for the level and scale of an error you're allowed to make? Because if they don't feel permission to do it differently, as you aptly offered, or if failure is not an option, then why in the world would they? Then they never will, right? So then what's the climate? Are people allowed to mess up at Cox? Will they? Or DePaul? Or
I mean, right, depends on what the mess up is, since we have children's
I
lives.
guess Brett didn't chime in. He's sick. He was going to call and be unseen. He's not here.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah, we can make mistakes. Yeah, we make mistakes all the time. We can try a strategy, it falls flat.
How about the city?
We can, but we better fix it.
We better fix it before anybody finds out. Seems like the stakes would be higher at optical cable. Is that possible? Or am I imagining it?
Well, optical cable does run strictly on procedures and processes, right? But we do, at least in the quality department, when we try to fix things, we always come back and it kind of follows McGregor. We have a meeting, and it used to be win-loss. Well, now it's win-learn. So did you win or did you learn?
That's kinder.
So we kind of try to give everybody some responsibility to make a decision, and it's usually product related or product failure related. So it's
where the product doesn't actually work.
Yes. Oh. And so it's a pretty extensive process to make fiber optic cables, and so when they don't work, one cable is typically in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. So it's it is a big deal
Yes,
to
it is.
make a wrong decision.
And probably expensive to remedy.
Yes.
Sheriff's Department. I mean, mistakes are inevitable. You're working with people.
Again, there's a scale, like she's saying, when you have like lives actually depending on it. I mean, anything that anybody messes up with the computer, I can fix. That is not a problem at all.
Right.
Nobody cares. You skip a walk through upstairs and an inmate hangs himself and you don't find him till he's cold.
That's a problem.
Yeah, now that's major problem. So yeah, again, there's wildly different levels of errors that you can make. Mhm.
And
In the
Hannah,
last context I served, mistakes were not welcome. And it was an incredibly anxious system that perpetuated cycles of blaming and shaming and judgment. Thankfully, I'm not in that environment anymore, and I'm in one in which there's a lot more permission to fail. And there's a lot, it's a flawed system just like any other, but it is far I experience it to be far healthier than one in which there was a lot of blame and shame when mistakes were made across the board, not only directed at me.
do people come to you and then also conversely appreciate being tapped into for their wisdom along the lines of McGregor before you elevate something?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm intrigued by McGregor's method of management. I'm also intrigued by chapter 6 in Leadership on the Line about giving work back, because that seems to, some of that seems, having not read that chapter, I anticipate there will be some parallels. But I do currently involve myself in more, or involve myself / make space for conversations about decisions that shouldn't involve me, needn't involve me, and that can be a big time suck. So I would love to save some time by exploring what it's like to give my work back and empower those in their roles to make decisions and come to me with problems and solutions.
Is it about control? Controlling
honestly, it's
safety?
For me, it's more about being pastoral. For those of you, I'm a pastor and now a pastor on staff at Princeton Seminary in New Jersey. And so keeping an open door, I'm not inviting myself into those conversations. When a colleague comes, comes with a question, I'm wanting to both empower them in their own decision making while also spending way too much time helping them make a decision, just because I'm trying to be kind and considerate. But that's not ultimately kind and considerate to myself, nor is it an effective use of my time.
Who can relate?
I just have a follow-up to that, coming from 4 years of working at Indiana Wesleyan University and working with individuals that are in seminary and faith-based organizations. It's that the expectation to show grace at every cost without holding someone accountable. And if you hold them accountable, you're not showing grace. So yeah, that's and so that's it's a sticky widget when you work in faith-based organizations. Sorry, I can relate to your pain.
It can be. Nobody wants to be a jerk in a faith-based organization.
Exactly. That's right. Similar
About redefining what that means, right? Redefining what being a jerk looks like in the professional environment.
I think it's similar in my field too. It's like social worker, we're supposed to give chances and chances. And don't give up on people.
Chances.
More chances. And we're not going to give up on the kids, so why would we give up on the staff
person. 70 times 7.
Wow.
Yeah,
So it's,
yeah.
Yeah, Mary was the.
Is there anything more to do with McGregor? Or shall we move to leadership on the line? If no, then let's get into that one. So leadership on the line. First 4 chapters. Next time we will introduce and start dealing with 5, 6, and 7. And then Amanda has some new material, so she will be here the next session. If there's any piece of 5, 6, and 7 we don't get to, we will pick it back up the next time, the following time when we are together. And I'll give you your additional reading assignment later. So when we talk about leadership as the distribution of loss, chapter 1 really makes that very, very clear. What stood out to you between chapters 1, so that's around loss, chapters 2, when we really are talking about the 4 faces of danger, when people are feeling the loss and they are resistant to whatever loss. You want them to, something's got to change here. And the way things are going is not acceptable. And we recognize they are not acceptable. So we set up a visual gap. The entire book, the entire course is really about addressing the gaps. Here is what we are dissatisfied with, why we should be dissatisfied with it. It's just not working. What are we willing to give up in order to get something better that is a more workable, sustainable solution? Now, the change formula, when we get it, is the logistics, the pathway, and whatever culture change and values and habits of mind and ways of thinking, everything that's going to have to change to fill in this gap. How are we going to get from here to here? But this book is about the gap. And to begin the book, to begin the theory, we have to understand that we are in the distribution of loss if something needs to change. Somebody's got to give up something, even if it is their way of being comfortable, even if it is their process and protocol. Whatever we're changing, we are delivering a loss. And so when they understandably resist because it makes them feel disoriented and full of ambiguity, and they know how to do it the old way, they don't want to do the new way. The most understandable and human response in the world is the same set of 4 responses that people have been using since elementary and middle school. We marginalize, we divert, we attack, we seduce, and sometimes in beautiful combination. Yeah. We all do some measure of that unless we are being mindful to figure out a good reason to hold on to that sacrifice and why it's worth it. But if we don't want it, it makes sense to try to neutralize whoever's talking about it and make them go away or get them down some other path. And you've read some of your feedback book. So we want this course to really be pretty simple. We didn't learn 5, 6 models. We learned just a few key delicious concepts that are kind of important, that they're going to also shut down and resist and hide behind truth, relationship, and identity obstacles. Those are the things in the first place that underscore why it makes sense to them to marginalize, divert, attack, and seduce. Because we cannot be wrong. We can't be right. Whatever we're saying is wrong, or because of a relationship thing, it's coming out of our mouths, we're a moron, or we don't know what we're talking about, or we don't know who they are in this, or what their role is, or should be, or used to be. They've got their own 3 triggers that absolutely inform that they are about to do one of those 4 faces of danger in chapter 2. Have you ever had a conflict where that wasn't true? Or someone came against something you were recommending? They found fault with it, or found fault with you. An attack is usually character assassination, right? Or integrity. You don't know. Although certainly it could be physical. Plenty of examples in the book around that as well. Marginalization. Attack can also be deauthorizing. Right? Rolling their eyes. Having crickets when you knew you were to be in a meeting to discuss something and you will withhold your opinion. There's something about that too, because in not responding, that's like kryptonite if they go to silence, right? You can't force somebody to talk, you can't force them to eat, you can't force them to do anything they don't want to do. They'll just sit there silently, but who knows what they're doing silently, right? There's a lot of gendered stuff about that. They might be in silent distress, really stressed out about whatever the content is, or they might be just silent and maybe just geography. Their body has to be there, but you can't make them engaged. So it's so interesting to me what people do with their energy around these things, around marginalizing. They may be believing that if they're quiet, clearly they're a casualty to our system, which we haven't gotten to that chapter yet, but really the idea that they're taking themselves out of it and not even going to participate. So they marginalize themselves in that way. And the system misses out on their voice. We lose their good ideas, especially if they were radically different than the ones on the table, because there's value there as well. And then chapter 3, well, what are you going to do in the face of people attacking, marginalizing, diverting, attacking, seducing? Instead of just smacking back and responding quickly or trying to address it and overfunction, we all have a personal default that we skew to unless we've worked on it. Like some people want to overfunction and solve it really quickly. We have people like that. And then others sort of slow down, maybe even grind to a halt. We have people like that. Okay.
Shut down.
Shut down.
Put on the headphones and just, completely.
So we would say that if we want to apply some kind of new strategy for how we want to embrace these issues that are fraught with loss, when you've got something that's changing up and people aren't going to like it. And I'm not talking about just an easy thing. If it really requires them to upend some process, something, some way of behaving at work or at home, we probably need to hang in diagnostics longer. We need to understand exactly what kind of problem we really have. In order to do that well, the authors of the book are going to invoke chapter 3, which is get on the balcony. Pull back and see what you can see when now you are looking for what they're saying, what they're not saying. Now, if it's a crisis, you don't have time to do stuff like that. Right? If it's a technical thing and your fiber optic cable doesn't work, that's a technical thing. Nobody's having to change their belief system because your product doesn't work. But if they really do have to change how they're coming to something, and they're very, very resistant, what do you do from the balcony to read the system and slow it down? Especially if you are fast to respond or fast to shut down, the balcony invites you to adjust your pace so that you preserve yourself a little more in a space that you can tolerate whatever's about to happen, but you are now being curious about it instead of over personalizing and trying to please or shut down or retreat. You're not doing the default mechanism that you're used to doing. And that's the kind of interesting space of being intentionally diagnostic about something, isn't it? What do you do from the balcony? A lot of people who are fast to react instead of respond, the reactors, they need a pause, first of all, to breathe and self-regulate. To stop taking it personally. You can't even see it if you own it and you're wearing it, right? You've painted yourself in it, you're swimming in it, you're taking it too personally, you don't even have enough distance to see it in a system. If you're so far away, not my circus, not my monkeys, you might not be feeling it in a way that appreciates the loss that you're asking other people to absorb either. So figuring out how to self-regulate both ways and right size how you're diagnosing. That's an interesting portion of chapter 3. And you have to be able to recognize that people are going to feel the loss, that they're going to naturally try to resist the loss if they are. And if they are, knowing how people do that, and then it's really just human, and have some compassion and how they do it in those 4 ways, you probably can look back at ways people resisted ideas that you put out at meetings or at home, right? When that loss was going to be talked about or levied. And if you can have some compassion, it's easier to do that and tap in if you saw it coming. So I think the book by chapter 2 can be pretty helpful in saying, these are pretty much the 4 ways, probably not any other way that it happens. But a lot can be subsumed under that umbrella. And if that's true, then what are they trying to do? I think they're probably trying to self-preserve somehow, right? They want to stay safe. They don't want to lose their status. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their role. They don't want to lose that sense of competence and expertise that they had. They don't want to lose maybe their peer group or their desk or their anything. And if they're resisting, they're not even available to fully engage in the change. And it can even be a situation where it's like it or lump it, this change is happening and it starts tomorrow. How to help them get around themselves and get back to plugging in their energy, or not, if they're going to ultimately be a casualty. It's a realistic model where not everybody comes along. People lose their jobs, they get laid off, they quit, they whatever. If it is at a rate disappointing your own people, change is disappointing to lots of people. It's not invigorating to many people. To those for whom it is disappointing them at a rate that they can bear without you or them getting killed off, right? Would be a measure of how to move a collective. How many people do you lose in XYZ change? The people we can't afford to lose are our family members, right? Sometimes that happens as well. So it acknowledges that sometimes there are casualties. So what questions did this chapter bring up, or these 4 chapters bring up for you? What did it give you to think about that you hadn't considered in that way before? And what kind of challenges maybe are you facing that if we need to pause the recording, we'll pause the recording to sort of workshop along the lines of loss or faces of danger, balcony, thinking politically. What do we have?
Personally, I like the part about your greatest opposition shouldn't really be seen as just the enemy and someone to be fought, but as the people that have the most to lose and therefore more deserving of compassion than anything, instead of just attacking back, but trying to understand instead.
Was that a new thought for you?
Not entirely, but then on like a more personal level, putting things aside and kind of thinking about some of our own people. Like, yeah, for a couple of them, yeah.
My favorite line, I think, or one of the perils of adaptive change, and it says, leadership would be a safe undertaking if your organizations and communities only face problems for which they already knew the solutions. That meant a lot, to me. It's like the problem, you have the solution, you know what you want it to look like, and here's the problem, you just have to get there. But sometimes you don't even know what the solution is. You don't know how to get there. And you don't go hard work with adaptive change.
For me, with the talk of getting on the balcony, I think it's going to be really helpful towards my goal of forcing myself to pause and to not be so reactionary and so quick to respond, and to take the breath and look at the situation and figure out what's going to be helpful to accomplish, and really just kind of taking myself out of the situation. It's something I haven't had a lot of practice with, and I know I need to do better at, and I plan to.
I think one of the things that I find really interesting is I see myself naturally as sort of a person who works for collaboration. I like pulling people together. I like, organizing teams and getting people together. And it was shocking and important for me to realize that as a leader, you have to disrupt and that there has to be loss. Because that seems so against what I want when I lead, because I think I'm leading to pull people together, and you are, but there's always that element of discomfort, which is true. When you do lead people, there usually is something difficult. I mean, all you have to do is serve on a board or volunteer group to kind of see how that works. But that was a really stunning revelation to me, in that it's a both and. It's okay that you can bring people together and you can disrupt the order of what's going on in order to get to a better thing. You have to lose something. Everybody has to lose something.
Nothing's going to get done very effectively, and people will lose their trust in you if all you do is work to please. You're of very little use to your people then.
I found over the last few weeks, talking about hitting the pause button, that sometimes I just need to physically hit the pause button. I need to get up and get out and walk and detach from that. And I can say over the past, probably since I got sick a few weeks ago, I haven't been doing that. And I can tell the difference that it makes in how I'm handling situations. I'm a little bit quicker to probably try to address something, and it doesn't always go the way that you want it to go, because you're not having the time to think about it. You're not having the time to come up with a solution before you react. So for me, one thing that I'm going to try to start doing again is remembering to take that 5 minutes, detach from the situation and get 5 minutes for me, so that I can better handle the situation. I haven't done that very well in the last few weeks. My time's been given to probably everybody but me. So.
And if you've been sick, you've been trying to catch up, probably.
Well, exactly. I've been sick. I've been traveling. I've had a lot of things going on that are kind of taking me out of my house, taking me out of my work, and you have jobs that still need to be done in both places. So, it does certainly add some additional stress, but I know there are things that I can do to kind of help combat that. So just need to get back on the wagon.
How about others?
I think it's kind of seeing it from their perspective a little bit. And what I do daily is typically, if I'm going to make a change, it's typically process related, or a good example I guess I have is there was a guy that he was a 20+ year employee, and he'd been using these same devices to measure things with, and turns out that they were, in pretty bad shape and worn out. And we gave him new devices, and he wouldn't have one of his old devices back.
Oh,
and
no.
I actually had to show him the data and the numbers to prove it to him that they were worn out. But I typically do that. I've done a lot of research and data collection, and I already know the numbers before I try to implement something. So when somebody's like, why do we have to do this? And I'm like, the data tells you why. But that doesn't really take in the empathy of taking it from their perspective. Why do they really care about this and not want the change?
I guess I'm kind of in the same boat with, I need to learn how to do that balcony. And that's not something that I've probably done before. So that's something I definitely need practice on doing, you know, tips on how to do that. Don't know how effective I'd be if I tried to do that right now.
Your chapter's coming. When you take something personally, what do you imagine people's perception of you is? Have they shared?
Being too sensitive.
Like, do they say, don't be so sensitive? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of
You're too
feedback do you
sensitive,
get?
yeah.
You're too sensitive. Okay.
But usually mine manifests more in anger, not anger towards people. I don't know of anybody that would say I'm, you know, angry towards people.
Right.
But I kind of internalize anger. So I come across as being in a bad mood.
So anger is a secondary emotion. If we say that, and underneath that is fear or hurt or some combination, would you say that you're fearful or you're hurt? Because it sounds like you get hurt that
Yeah,
you were
I think-
wrong and you were seen being wrong.
Yeah, probably more of, you know, being hurt. Because I'm not afraid to be wrong. And what I like to tell people is, because I'm trying very hard, because I do think I'm right a lot, and I need to not be that
That's
way.
why I own it.
I do. I really do try to own my faults. And so I always start out with, I could be wrong, and it happens more than I like, but this is what I think. You know, to try to, maybe prepare myself for, if they don't like it, you know, at least I told them up front, this may not be the right thing, but I
As
don't
soon
want
as
to
you
stop
said the
giving
but,
ideas.
it wiped out everything you just said. I could be wrong, but right.
Right.
It's like a PR announcement right before you
Right.
deliver what the
And
real
that's how I
truth
kind of
is.
feel like I'm doing. Yeah. But you know, I'm not trying to tell you I have the right way. This is what I think. So I don't know if that's the right thing for me to be doing or not. But
I can understand that, considering I know how our culture is. But yeah,
yeah,
I totally get where you're coming.
but I'm not going to shut up. Some people, you know, probably don't want my suggestions or ideas, and not that I don't care. I use that a lot. I always say I don't care. It's not that I don't care, but I feel like I should be heard. I feel like everybody should be heard. So I'm
Is
not
it
gonna
possible
stop
you care
talking.
too much sometimes?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've been there 21 years, so.
What happens
I
if you
care.
go out of here and something happens to you and you don't go in tomorrow? What happens to your job?
Oh, they just make my coworker do it.
Okay.
Until they can find somebody to take over.
But
They don't care.
they'll keep going on without you.
Yes, 100%. That's what we say. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, they're just gonna fill my slot. That's all that they're gonna do.
Do they think about you when you're not at work?
No,
Do you think about them?
no.
Do you think about the work when you're not at work?
No, not the work.
What do you think about?
The people.
Okay.
Our core team.
You'll do anything to not let them down.
Yes.
Your neighbor right there thinks about work.
All the time.
I wonder if
Wow.
you dream. I sit here and wonder, are you dreaming about work?
Probably,
A lot
yeah.
of work-related stress dreams.
Yeah.
Oh, work dreams.
Wow.
Who dreams
Yeah,
about
people-
work?
God.
Not
Look at
me.
you, all these volunteers.
That's why I wasn't a teacher. When I'm done, I'm done.
I'm done.
That's why I don't work from home. I will
leave
stay
at
in the
work.
office till 9 o'clock if I have to. I do not work from home.
But I have to admit, at one point, I was the one that was up until the wee hours of the morning trying to solve that problem. So the next day, everything works the way it's supposed to work. And it just got to a point where I said, you know what? You need to shut it down. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You'll be okay until I get in there, kind of thing. It just you got to that point for me because I was that person all hours of the night, not sleeping. And then my kid is like, you got homework again? You know, because I can't spend time with him. So I totally get it.
Who works at home here? Oh, look.
Like after work?
Sometimes
That's most of the table. Ann Henley, you working at home?
Occasionally, but not as much as I used to.
When you're at home, are you still thinking about work sometimes?
Oh, I am absolutely convicted by my energy being sucked thinking about work, even when I'm not doing it. I'm also convicted by Leadership on the Line, page 41.
Let's look.
The top of the page where it
That's right where it is.
describes it describes attention as the currency of leadership. And my attention is on work far more than it should be, and at work it's on things that it needn't be. That's thanks to you, Abrina. I'm self-reflecting all the time, so I'm
so happy I can serve in that way.
So I'm thinking about work, I'm thinking about Batten, I'm feeling like I shouldn't be thinking about work, and yet I'm wanting to apply it to all of this. But yes, I'm really struck by how much I'm using, if attention is the currency of my leadership, to what I'm focusing my attention on and why. And
is it gendered? Stephen and Michael.
Wow.
Do you
sometimes
work at home?
Yeah, I do a lot of work from home after work. I have a desktop at work and a laptop at home. All so that's.
Has it always been that way?
For the most part.
And if you can't get to your laptop for any reason, do you start stressing about it?
If it's something time sensitive and critical,
right?
Sure.
Okay. But you.
Much less now than before, where I was actually working on technical work related issues, which was something working I would feel for a while, but now I can pick and choose what I do, so I don't work as much. If I want to play with something that's fun, I will. But
that's for entertainment.
Yeah.
Okay. How does that work in your world? Did you have good boundaries anyway, or is there something that you hold?
Honestly, because we're always open, the jail at least when I was over there, I mean, when you leave, there's another shift come on. Anything you leave undone, they're doing. So it's not like there's anything to take home. I mean, it's all directly passed on to the next shift of, hey, I didn't finish booking this guy. He needs to be put in. And
right.
You go home. I mean, there is no take home with that. I mean, I refuse to even check my email if I'm not at work.
Good.
Unless someone texts me and says, did you see what they did? Then you have to.
Any other burning thoughts before we break?
The part, well, I guess I would say the theme that I found interesting that stood out was trying to treat the symptoms instead of the underlying problem,
right?
Kind of thing. I just never looked at it that way. I've always thought the symptom was the problem. Does that make sense?
Oh, well, sure it makes sense.
So it's forcing me to kind of, especially what I'm going through now, really look at what's causing these symptoms, what's really going on, and trying to address that.
It's funny you say that, because when we do root cause analysis, we say we have two journeys. One is from symptom to cause, the other one's from cause to remedy. So,
to be honest with you, that's where I live. That's what I do for a living. So, I've never applied it to per se. I've always applied it to the process. This is interesting.
Have you seen in these first handful of chapters squarely where your goal is situating itself? That somehow it's being addressed, if not finding a solution yet, you're seeing reasons why it is a goal. Is that true for each of you?
My goal is changing for me. In reading this, my goals are completely changing. So I'm a bit confused, and I know what I want for me. I need to be somewhere impactful, and that's very important to me. So even not only the balcony portion, but just being able to be confident in the decisions that I'm making as a leader, is my goal is really, really changing for me. So yeah, I'm really confused. So we have a lot to talk about. When I come.
I'm excited for you.
Me too. Is it a time for a 5-minute break? Is it a good time for breaking? Great, they say. Okay, Shion, eat more soup, and Henley, get a refreshment. We will check back.
Great.
She looks really sick.
Yeah, Brad's also sick. We've got a couple
There's a
now.
lot of people who's sick.
Let's see if we can share what we want to share here. The dysfunctions part takes, it splits in half. One is how it just is dysfunctional, and the next part should be how he gets better. And Henley, Shion, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, good job.
Perfect.
We'll start. It's highly worthy of taking notes.
Teamwork is not a virtue. It's a choice. You need to decide if you're going to be a team or not and accept the sacrifices and the cost that it entails. It comes down to mastering some simple concepts that you probably already know. But the hard part is doing them every day, day in and day out. It's the discipline of mastering some simple things.
Hi, I'm Pat Linchoni, and I'm the author of the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The purpose of this video, which we're filming here at our offices at the Table Group, is to provide you with a better understanding of the theories in my book so that you can apply them in your organizations and on your teams. During the next hour or so, I'm going to be diving into each of the dysfunctions one by one and providing some theory and some anecdotes to help you understand the model. And then I'm going to be going through and providing you with some tips for overcoming the dysfunctions on your teams. Now, there's a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and get started. There is no doubt about the power of teamwork. Groups that work as teams make better, faster decisions than non-teams and tap into all of the skills and opinions of the people around them. They avoid wasting time and energy because of politics, confusion, and destructive back-channel conflict. They also ensure greater alignment within the organizations they lead because they're on the same page, rowing in the same direction, if you will. So I strongly believe that teamwork is the most untapped competitive advantage in business today. The question, though, is why is it so rare? For all the talk about teamwork and all the attention it supposedly receives, it isn't apparent in most organizations. Why? Well, first, I think the term has been overused and lost much of its meaning, like so many other buzzwords in the corporate world. That's why I like to say that teamwork is not a virtue. Not motherhood and apple pie, rather it's a choice, and a strategic one. It's a purposeful decision that organizations make. Second, people tend to overcomplicate teamwork. The fact is, it's simple, in theory anyway. Most of us already know what teamwork requires, but in practice, teamwork is indeed difficult. That's because human beings are messy, fallible creatures, and when you put enough of us in a room and ask us to work together, problems will arise. To overcome these problems, teams must be willing to invest significant time and energy and discipline. Few organizations are willing to do that, And so teamwork, in spite of all the talk, remains a rarity. For those willing to do what it requires, the rewards are great. But let's go ahead and dive into the first dysfunction and begin the process of understanding how to make teamwork a reality in your organization. The first dysfunction of a team is the absence of trust. And while that might sound obvious, it's important to understand that when I say trust, I'm not referring to what I call predictive trust, which is the ability to predict how someone is going to act because you've known them for a long time. In other words, I know Jim well enough to know that if I say this, this is how he'll react. When I say trust, I'm referring to something that I call vulnerability-based trust. That's the ability of team members to be emotionally vulnerable with one another, but not in a contrived or touchy-feely kind of way. They need to be able to say things like, I was wrong, or I made a mistake, or I need help, or I'm sorry. They have to get comfortable being completely open to one another, buck naked, if you will. Why is this so important? Because teams that have an absence of trust often exhibit the following behaviors. They conceal their weaknesses and mistakes from one another. They hesitate to ask for help or provide constructive feedback. They don't offer help to people outside of their own areas of responsibility. They jump to conclusions about the intentions and aptitudes of others without attempting to clarify them.
Did you get that? You need it? You need to go back? That's too slow.
They don't offer help to people outside of their own areas of responsibility. They jump to conclusions about.
Yeah. Have you found some of that to be true?
Yes.
And this works seamlessly, personally and professionally. Ready for the next page? All right.
About the intentions and aptitudes of others without attempting to clarify them. They fail to recognize and tap into one another's skills and experiences. They waste time and energy managing their behaviors for effect. They hold grudges. And finally, they find reasons to avoid spending time together.
Everybody got it? All right.
Here's an example of how just one of these behaviors can hurt a team.
So I worked with an executive team that had this amazing group of executives and had all this great technology and money and products and every reason in the world to succeed, but they were struggling. And when I would go to offsite meetings with the team, we would notice that there was something wrong. Another consultant and I would go there. And finally, we started to talk about trust. And at dinner one night, between 2 days of an offsite, they had some wine with dinner, which is the great elixir of truth for many teams. And after a couple glasses of wine, this woman said, let me tell you something. It's been 10 years since I've been married to my husband. And I've barely learned to trust him. So I'm not going to be trusting you guys anytime soon, if ever. We were like, oh. And we started to think about it and realize this was the problem on the team. Because whenever she made a comment during a meeting, whenever she said, this is what I think we should do, nobody bothered challenging her or questioning her. because they knew if they did, she was impossible. She had no chance of being vulnerable. She couldn't say, gee, that's a better idea, or I hadn't thought of that, or maybe I'm wrong, or what do you think? All she would do is defend her position. And as a result, people learned, well, she's not vulnerable. I'm not going to trust that we can challenge her on that. And so whenever she spoke at a meeting, the conversation would grind to a halt until someone changed the subject. Well, the CEO and I of a company, also a woman, she and I went outside after that dinner and said, we've got to do something about this. Okay? But you got to be caring about people when you realize they might have this institutional trust problem. So we had to work with her and try to get her to open up and help her realize why trust was such an important part on the team. And how if she were to open up and admit when she was wrong and seek out other people's advice, she wouldn't lose, she would gain credibility, she'd gain strength. She couldn't do it after a number of months. She had to be managed out of the team. It was amazing to see the team perform during the first meeting after she was gone. The message I want to tell you today is this. If just one member of a team can't be trusted or can't trust others through vulnerability, not can't be trusted because they're unethical, can't open up and be vulnerable, the entire team suffers.
Often when we see lack of vulnerability, it starts with the leader. Let's listen to a quick story about a leader who struggled with vulnerability and the impact it had on his team.
I once worked with an executive, a fairly famous executive, you've probably heard of the guy. He's no longer at the company he was at when I worked with him because they had such a trust problem on their executive team. And even though business magazines will write that the company struggled because of some strategic error they made or a decision they made, the truth of the matter is the reason why the company struggled was because they had no trust on the executive level. And here's why. Here's an example of why. It started with the leader. I was working with the head of human resources at this company, and we convinced the CEO that he needed to do 360 feedback because people had a lot to say, they weren't saying it to him. So he said, sure, I'll do it. So they did 360-degree feedback, and then a couple months went by, and he still hadn't shared his results with them. So the head of human resources convinced this guy, it's time for you to go over the results with your team. He said, okay. And then he reluctantly allowed me to come as an outside consultant. So he stood up in front of the team, and he opened up his results, and he said, okay, it says here that my weakest areas are, first of all, it says I don't listen very well. Gee, I thought I was a pretty good listener. What do you guys think? And to a person, this is the truth, to a person, they went around the table and, oh yeah, I think you're a good listener. Yeah, I do too. Oh yeah, you're a really good listener. Yeah, you're right. True story, I'm not making it up. He's like, yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay, good. I promise you, I'm not making this up. Next one, it says here that I could afford to give more praise. I thought I'd gotten better at that. What do you guys think? Yeah, I think you've gotten really good at it. Yeah, me too, me too, me too. They went around the table. He's like, okay, good. So I was sitting in the back room going, okay, moment of truth for me. Here's where I lose a client. And so I rolled my chair up to the conference table. I was like, excuse me, but you guys here in this room, you're the only people who filled this out. So, I mean, somebody wrote this stuff down. Kind of quiet. Then the head of marketing bravely raised his hand and said, well, I'll admit it. I think that you could praise me more and my team. We feel like we never hear anything unless we screwed up. Very uncomfortable. The head lawyer said, not me, I think you give great praise. Everybody else said, me too, me too, me too, me too. Oh, I'm dying. They just killed the guy. See, this CEO, though, had no capacity to stand up in front of God and everybody else and say what they already knew, and that's, hey, I speak to some things. I know I'm bad at this. I try, and I'm still bad, and I need your help. I'm sorry, but I really am bad at this stuff. I mean, it seems so simple, right? Because you know that's a credibility gainer if you can do that. And yet he stood there like the emperor with no clothes, with his big bottom hanging out there for the world to see. Going, oh, gee, I thought I was a good listener. Yeah, okay, good.
The leader of a team can't be vulnerable, then the people who work for that leader certainly won't be vulnerable, and trust is going to suffer. Now, why is that so important? Because without trust, a team is definitely going to succumb to the next dysfunction. Okay, the second dysfunction of a team is a fear of conflict. Team members who don't trust one another are not going to feel comfortable engaging in unfiltered, passionate debate around issues and decisions. Instead, they're going to hold back their opinions, choose their battles, take everything offline, and strive for something I like to call artificial harmony. Now, as a result, they're going to experience many of the telltale signs of a team that lacks conflict. What does that look like? Well, teams that lack conflict have boring meetings, They create environments where back-channel politics and personal attacks thrive. They ignore controversial topics that are critical to the team's success. They fail to tap into all the opinions and perspectives of team members. And they waste their time and energy with posturing.
And also probably included in boring meetings is that you're getting crickets, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking back and you've talked to them. They've just sort of done the mental math and decided it's not safe, it's not worth it, and just let you deliver your monologue. And it'll go away faster. And then what do you own in that? It's not just their problem. That's you, right? What are you doing that makes it unsafe or unapproachable or unacceptable? Are you showing yourself to have such a low tolerance for being disappointed that somebody absolutely gives up because it's not even worth bothering? And that would be a loss that you'd have to figure out if you're willing to absorb so that you could learn them. The next to last one, have you been in rooms where only one or two people give their opinions? And they're always the one you can count on to say what they think. And other people don't take airtime even though you believe you're giving it. Isn't it interesting that the people who are quick to be seen as confident or engaged, they're not also taking ownership or distributing authority in the room?
Mm.
Figuring out what people do with their energy is fascinating.
With managing interpersonal risk. Now, as important as conflict is, it's worthwhile to understand that it looks different from company to company and culture to culture. Let's take a look at a video clip that explains this. The companies in the US, just to talk about big companies, that are best at conflict are Intel, Microsoft, and GE. Now, I don't know if you know a lot about business, and I don't read the Wall Street Journal for fun. You know, I have a life and kids and all that other kind of stuff too. But one of the things I can tell you is those are three outstanding companies, and it's no accident that they're outstanding because they love conflict. You know why? Because they don't waste a lot of time on things that don't matter. I once worked with a guy, he was a client of mine, and he worked directly for Andy Grove, the former chairman and CEO of Intel, kind of a famous guy. And this guy talked about giving a presentation one day where he was talking, and Andy Grove interrupted him and said, no, this is a terrible presentation. After 5 minutes, you might want to stop right now and come back tomorrow with a better story, because so far this is really bad. And the guy didn't complain when he told this to me, he was bragging about it. He said that was the culture they had. They could call each other on things. Now, I don't recommend that particular culture to every company I work with. But the point of the matter is they didn't mince their words because they trusted one another and they understood what their culture of conflict is. So I love working with companies on the East Coast and the West Coast and seeing the difference in conflict culture. You know, and there was a cartoon years ago that I saw that really depicted this well. You had a guy in Los Angeles. He's on the street and he says to somebody, "Good morning." And the bubble shows what he's really thinking, and it says, in effect, "Screw you." And then it shows the guy in New York and he's like, "Screw you," and the bubble says, "Good morning." You know? And it's so true. I'll work with an executive team in New York and they're screaming and shouting and calling each other names, and then they're like, all right, let's go have a beer. And then there'll be people in Los Angeles or in San Francisco, high-tech companies, and they're like, I don't like the color of your brochure, and they're like panicking. Now, it doesn't really matter what your conflict style is, whether you're New York or LA or somewhere in the middle. What does matter is this: are members of your team holding back? You need to make sure that everyone is comfortable weighing in and sharing their opinions without reservation. But even when you get good at conflict, and I think our team here at the Table Group is pretty good at it, even when you're good at it, you're going to feel discomfort. And it's important to understand that even the best teams find conflict to be a little bit uncomfortable, but you have to do it anyway. Because at the end of your meetings, you're going to know you've made the best decision possible, and you've extracted the opinions and the ideas of everyone in the room. There's another reason why conflict is so important, because without it, we will not be able to avoid the next dysfunction of a team. The third dysfunction of a team is the lack of commitment. When team members are unwilling to weigh in and share their opinions, there is a very high likelihood that they're not going to commit to whatever decision is made. So what does a team that struggles with commitment do? Well, it creates ambiguity among the team about direction and priorities. It watches windows of opportunity close due to excessive analysis and unnecessary delay. It breeds lack of confidence and fear of failure. It revisits discussions and decisions again and again, and it encourages second guessing among team members.
Imagine to the person, we've all sat in rooms where they tabled finding a resolution, and then we had to discuss it at the next 2 or 3 meetings, and nothing ever got done.
Yeah. Keep the camera.
Do some people, speaking of the first bullet point, get messages where everything is a top priority?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how ridiculous. How many things can be number one?
Right.
Now, I once worked with an executive team at a large company that spent 2 hours in a meeting discussing the need to freeze all company hiring until the organization had stabilized financially. When the meeting ended, the head of human resources went to her office and sent an email to managers announcing the hiring freeze. Within 5 minutes, 3 of the 6 executives who had attended that meeting were in her office insisting that they had never agreed to the hiring freeze, and so it didn't apply to them. And that's because they didn't engage in conflict. And that's why conflict plays such a huge role in commitment. You see, human beings must weigh in on a topic if they're going to actually buy into it. But the thing is, human beings are also more reasonable than we understand. They don't necessarily need to have their way adopted, but they do need to have their ways heard, considered, and understood. Now, while some teams struggle with commitment precisely because they haven't had conflict and they haven't given everyone an opportunity to weigh in, others struggle for different reasons. Some have a need for certainty. They fear making the wrong decision. Still others strive for consensus. They want everyone to agree on everything. In any case, what suffers is clarity and commitment. And why is this such a problem? Because without commitment, the next dysfunction of a team comes into play. The fourth dysfunction of a team is the avoidance of accountability. But what I'm talking about here is peer-to-peer accountability. On a team, peer pressure is your best friend. You see, cohesive teams hold one another accountable and don't rely on the leader to do so. That's because asking the leader to be the primary source of accountability is inefficient and can breed politics. You see, it's far more effective when team members go directly to one another and give frank, honest feedback. What does it look like when a team can't do this? Well, those kind of teams create resentment among team members who have different standards of performance. They encourage mediocrity, they miss deadlines and key deliverables, they place an undue burden on the team leader as the sole source of discipline.
Experience that? heard it a lot over the years, and I'm sure you've witnessed it, where people say, well, they act this way or that way, and the supervisor just lets them get away with it. Ready? How about people who play chicken with it? I did not fart. I was
While the leader of a
waiting
team
on
should not
such
be
and
the
such.
primary arbiter of accountability, he or she must be the ultimate arbiter of it. If a leader cannot hold people on the team accountable, team members won't do it to one another. Let's listen to a story about a leader who struggled with accountability in a big way.
I once worked with an executive who was the CEO of a company and the president and chief operating officer too. He had all those titles. And he was frankly tired of being the president and chief operating officer because he liked strategy and vision and liked to do talks and marketing. He didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day operations. So he said, I'm going to hire a chief operating officer and a president. So after a while, he was looking for this person. One of his direct reports, who I will call Fred, who was not very well liked by his peers, Fred started to tell everyone on the team, I'm going to be the next president. So people were pretty upset about this and concerned. And finally, one brave soul went to this famous CEO and said, excuse me, I have a question. Is Fred going to be the next president? And the CEO said, no. He said, okay, second question. Did you know he was telling everybody that? The CEO said, I had no idea. Third question, one more. Are you going to tell him to stop? And this is what he said verbatim, and I hear this all the time from CEOs. Oh, I don't have the time and the energy for that. I got a lot on my plate. I don't have the time and the energy to deal with stuff like that. I don't know about you, but hey, Fred, yeah, it's the CEO. No, you're not going to be the next president. Yeah, you're kind of ticking me off that you're telling everybody that. Something bad's going to happen to you if you don't stop, buddy. Yeah, have a good day. What was that, like 8 seconds? Kind of energizing, in fact. You know, I was tired.
Now, what did you notice about that example? The CEO wasn't failing to hold someone accountable for results, because even the wimpiest CEO can usually do that. He failed to hold someone accountable for their behaviors, which is the key problem I find. Behaviors are almost always the precursor to results, and so they have to be confronted. But confronting our peers on behaviors is not an easy thing to do, and nor will it ever be. Still, it's critical that team members be able to do this if they want their teams to be truly cohesive. Now, I'm often asked about the difference between conflict and accountability because they are kind of similar. The key difference is this. Accountability is about confronting people about their execution against current plans that have already been agreed upon, and it's not emotional. While conflict is a much more emotional activity in the moment, and it's one that happens in the course of making decisions in the first place. Here's how I like to think about the difference between conflict and accountability as a parent.
So someday, and I'm dreading this day, like 11 years from now, they're going to be driving, because they're 5 years old, and they're going to come home from a date at 10:30, and the curfew is going to be 10 o'clock. And I'm going to meet them at the door, and we're going to have it out, because that's how I am. Where have you been? Did you hear 10 o'clock? What do you think? You're just ignoring? And they're going to say, Dad, it's unfair, blah, blah, all this stuff, and we'll have it out. And then so we'll have the conflict. And then at the end, they're going to say, so am I grounded? And I'll go, yeah. And I know what you're thinking, buddy, you're in for a long life. Because I got to fix this. But that's the thing. I don't like to hold people accountable. I don't like to say, that's got to stop. I don't mind having a theoretical conversation with them and getting passionate, but when I have to draw the line and say, you can't do that anymore, and this is the consequences, I don't like it.
Why is accountability so important? Because like the other dysfunction, without it, we can't overcome the next one. The fifth and final dysfunction of a team is inattention to results. Now you may be wondering, what else would team members be focused on? Well, it could be anything from their own department to their career, their status, or their ego. And the only way a team can be certain it will remain focused on collective results is to ensure that team members are holding one another accountable for what they need to be doing. So what happens when a team fails to focus on results? Well, the following. They rarely defeat their competitors. They lose achievement-oriented employees. They encourage team members to focus on their own careers and individual goals. They become easily distracted. They stagnate, and they fail to grow.
had that happen on your teams?
Truly cohesive teams focus obsessively on the results of their team and of the entire organization. Almost nothing else matters. They're intolerant of actions and behaviors that serve the interest of individuals, but that don't promote the common good of the team. As a result, team members are willing to make sacrifices in the organizations they run in order to drive the collective results of their team. Now, one incredible example of a team member focusing on something other than collective results comes from the world of sports. His name is Scottie Pippen. Let's take a look at this clip.
Scottie Pippen is coming back to Chicago, am I right?
Famous leadership case. It's also
Years ago, when Michael Jordan retired the first of 3 times, what people often don't realize in retrospect was that the Bulls were still probably the best team in the NBA, right? I mean, and I don't want to go through the players. I could, but I'm not going to. But they have this amazing group of players. Pippen was now their leader and their star. And they had Phil Jackson as a coach and everything else. Well, at one point in the playoffs that year, you remember this? They were playing the Knicks, and I think there was 10 seconds left to go in the game, and they were tied. Phil Jackson, the coach, called the team over, Pippen, the leader, and all the players, and said, here's the play. He designed a play. The ball was going to actually go to Tony Kukoc to take the last shot. Remember, what did Pippen do? Sat on the bench, refused to go on the court. You know, the announcers were like, did he foul out? They were looking at their sheet. Did he get hurt? I didn't see him get hurt. No. He sat out. He said, if I don't get to take the last shot, then I'm not going out there. And you know, what a beautiful thing for him to do. I wish every executive team I worked with had the audacity for a person on the team to say, hey, it's not about the team, it's about me. I mean, it's so clear. I mean, it's like most times they hide it. But he was like, no, really, I don't play. I don't care if we win. I mean, it's about me. The coach made the shot and they won the game, but that's irrelevant. The point is we have to ask ourselves on our teams, is it about the results we're trying to achieve? Or is it about how we feel about ourselves or how our own careers develop?
Did you have good ideas that occurred to you around team functioning? Teams you've been on, teams you're currently on? Write it down, make notes, hold those thoughts. This comes back into play in 2 weeks. And hopefully let you start marinating the material on top of the other couple of pieces you've already read and we've discussed. Is anything burning with resonance for someone right now? And they're like, oh my gosh, never knew it, never thought of it before. You're having big revelations.